My name is Olivia, I'm 26, and on the morning of my wedding, I found my fiancé in bed with my own sister. Before I tell you about the one phone call I made that brought their world crashing down, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. The first thing I remember isn't the sight, but the sound. It was a sound I knew as well as my own heartbeat, my younger sister Sophia's laugh. It wasn't her loud, performative laugh for an audience, it was her low, intimate giggle, the one she used when she thought no one was listening. It trickled from beneath the door of room 302 at the Millbrook Inn, a sound so out of place it made the hairs on my arms stand up. It was followed by a deeper, rumbling voice that I also knew intimately. The voice of my fiancé, James. My hand, already raised to knock, froze in midair. My knuckles were inches from the cool, polished wood of the door, a door that I would soon realize was a gateway, separating my life into a before and an after. Back at my parents' house, my wedding dress was waiting. It was a beautiful, classic ivory gown that I'd spent months, and a significant portion of my teacher's salary, choosing. My hair was elegantly swept up, my makeup flawlessly applied. I was supposed to be a bride, the glowing center of a perfect day I had meticulously planned for over a year. Instead, I was standing in a sterile hotel hallway that smelled of stale air conditioning and lemon-scented disinfectant, a cold, heavy dread coiling in the pit of my stomach like a serpent. The door wasn't fully latched. It was ajar, just a crack, as if fate itself wanted me to see. Against every screaming instinct in my body that told me to turn around, to run, to pretend I hadn't heard anything, I pushed it open. Just another inch. My breath caught in my throat. And there they were. Tangled in the pristine white hotel sheets that were supposed to be for me and my new husband tonight. My younger sister, my maid of honor, her blonde hair fanned out across the pillow. And the man I had loved for 4 years, the man I had just written vows for, promising a lifetime of fidelity. They were dead to the world, sleeping off whatever sordid betrayal they had committed in the hours before our wedding. The scream I thought would tear out of my throat, the one you see in movies, never came. There was no shouting, no throwing a lamp against the wall. Instead, a strange, terrifying calm washed over me. It was the kind of calm that comes after a tornado has already ripped through your town and destroyed everything you own. There's nothing left to save, so you just stand there, amidst the wreckage, and breathe. I backed away slowly, my movements robotic. I pulled the door gently until it clicked shut, the sound echoing in the silent hallway like a gavel. My back hit the floral-papered wall opposite the door, and I slid down to the floor, the cheap, scratchy carpet a rough contrast to the silk lining of my jacket. For 1 full minute, I let myself break. It was a silent, convulsive breakdown. Tears streamed down my face, hot and fast, but I didn't make a sound. I wrapped my arms around my stomach, trying to hold myself together as my whole body shook with sobs that made no noise. This was it. The grand finale. The culmination of a lifetime of being second best, of being the reliable, boring wallpaper to my sister's dazzling, destructive fireworks. Then, as suddenly as it began, the shaking stopped. I wiped my face with the back of my hand, the tears feeling cold and foreign on my skin. I pulled up my phone and looked at my reflection in its dark, blank screen. The perfectly made-up bride stared back at me, but her eyes were different. The soft, hopeful light was gone, replaced by something hard and empty. Something cold and sharp as a shard of glass. Resolve. I stood up, my legs shaky but determined. I smoothed down my jacket, took a deep, shuddering breath, and unlocked my phone. I wasn't going to be a victim. I wasn't going to let them reduce me to a weeping mess in a hotel hallway. They had written the scene, but I was going to write the ending. I scrolled through my contacts, my thumb hovering over a name that made my heart pound with a new, furious rhythm. Then I pressed call. As the phone rang on the other end, my life, the real one, the one that had been happening behind my back while I was busy being the good daughter, the understanding fiancé, flashed before my eyes. This wasn't just about a single act of betrayal in a hotel room. It was about the thousands of tiny cuts that had led to this gaping wound. I remembered being 10 years old, clutching my straight-A report card. I'd worked so hard for it, staying up late studying while Sophia was watching TV. I ran into the kitchen, bursting with pride, ready to show my parents. But they were busy. They were crouched on the floor, cooing over a messy finger painting Sophia had made at daycare. "Oh, Sophia, you're a little Picasso," my mother had gushed. My report card was eventually pinned to the fridge, but it was placed behind her colorful, chaotic smear of paint. It was hidden. That was the story of my life. I was the sturdy, reliable, invisible background. Sophia was the vibrant, messy foreground that stole all the light and all the praise. Years later, at my high school graduation, the pattern repeated itself, only this time it was sharper, more painful. I was the valedictorian. I had a speech to give, a major academic scholarship to accept that would pay for a huge chunk of my college fund. I felt, for a fleeting moment, that this was my time to shine. But the family dinner that night, the one supposedly in my honor, wasn't about me. It was about Sophia. She had just been named captain of the cheerleading squad, a position she'd won through popularity, not talent. My academic achievements, the result of years of discipline and hard work, were treated as a given. "Oh, Olivia will always be fine," my mother said to a relative, waving a dismissive hand as if swatting away a fly. "She's the responsible one." Responsible. That was the word they used to chain me down. Responsible meant I didn't need praise. It meant I didn't need attention. It meant my feelings could be overlooked because I would always do the right thing anyway. It meant I could be ignored. Even when James came into my life, it felt like I was somehow living on borrowed time, borrowed happiness. He was everything a girl from Millbrook was supposed to want: handsome, charming, ambitious, working his way up in his father's hugely successful construction firm. He was a catch. When he proposed to me on a trip to the coast, with a ring that must have cost a fortune, I was ecstatic. I thought, finally, this is mine. This is my story. But even then, the shadows of the past crept in. At our engagement party, my mother, after her second glass of champagne, pulled me aside. She put a cool hand on my arm, her voice a conspiratorial whisper that carried across the room. "You know," she said, smiling a little too brightly, "I always thought Sophia's personality was a better match for James. He's so full of life, and you're so steady." She said it like a joke, a harmless observation. But it landed like a stone in my gut. A punch to the gut. It was a casual, thoughtless cruelty, a reminder that even in my happiest moment, I was still just the second choice. The safe bet. The sensible, boring consolation prize. And Sophia played her part perfectly. She threw herself into the wedding planning with a terrifying, manic enthusiasm. She was my maid of honor, my supposed confidant. She insisted on helping me with every detail: the flowers, the cake, the venue. Looking back, I see it for what it was: a performance. A long, elaborate act of sabotage. She was meticulously building my dream wedding with one hand while systematically sleeping with my fiancé with the other. The betrayal wasn't a mistake, a moment of weakness. It was a conquest. She didn't just want my fiancé, she wanted my life. She wanted to prove, once and for all, that she could take anything she wanted from me, whenever she pleased. The phone on the other end of the line clicked. A gruff, familiar voice answered. "Hello?" "Mr. Harrison," I said, my voice shockingly steady, betraying none of the Category 5 hurricane raging inside me. "It's Olivia. I'm so sorry to call this early on a Saturday, but there's an emergency regarding James. I need you and Mrs. Harrison to come to the Millbrook Inn. Room 302. Immediately." The weeks leading up to the wedding were a highlight reel of red flags I had willfully, stupidly chosen to paint white. James started working late almost every night. He'd come home smelling faintly of a perfume that wasn't mine, a sweet, musky scent I now recognized as Sophia's signature fragrance. When I'd ask about it, he'd just sigh, running a hand through his hair. "It's a huge commercial project, Liv. Dad is putting a lot of pressure on me." Sophia was just dropping off some paperwork from her office. He'd look so tired, so stressed, that I'd feel a pang of guilt for even questioning him. So I'd do what I always did. I'd make him dinner, rub his shoulders, and tell myself to be more supportive. A good fiancé, a responsible partner, wouldn't add to his stress. Meanwhile, Sophia was a constant, buzzing presence in our lives, an invasive vine wrapping herself around my relationship. She and James were always texting, their phones buzzing in unison. They'd be huddled in corners at family gatherings, whispering and laughing. The moment I'd walk in, they'd jump apart, smiling brightly, their faces a mask of innocence. Just finalizing the surprise for your bachelorette party. Sophia would chirp, her eyes sparkling with a malicious light I now recognized as deceit. They were a team. They were gaslighting me in my own home, making me feel like I was the crazy one, the suspicious one, for even having a flicker of doubt. One afternoon, I came home early from a parent-teacher conference and found them in the living room. The lights were dim, and a slow, romantic song was playing. It was her favorite song, not mine. They were standing close, too close, swaying slightly to the music. They weren't dancing, not really, but there was an intimacy in their posture that made my stomach clench. When they saw me, Sophia didn't even flinch. She just laughed it off. "Oh, hi, Liv. We were just testing out songs for the reception. Don't you think this one is perfect for your first dance?" Before I could answer, James had crossed the room, wrapping his arms around me in a hug that felt more like a cage. "Whatever you want, honey. It's your day," he murmured into my hair. He made me feel cherished and foolish at the same time, while he was actively planning his betrayal. The dress was perhaps the cruelest, most calculated trick of all. I had found a beautiful, classic A-line gown at the first bridal shop we visited. It was elegant, timeless, and it made me feel like myself, like a princess. But Sophia was relentless. "Oh, Liv, it's a little boring, don't you think?" she'd said, her nose wrinkled in distaste. "You have a great figure, you should show it off. Don't be so safe." She steered me towards a slinky, form-fitting mermaid-style dress that was covered in sequins. It wasn't me. I felt exposed and gaudy in it, like I was wearing a costume. But she and my mother ganged up on me, a formidable alliance of bad taste and manipulation. "You look absolutely stunning," my mother declared, clapping her hands together. "Don't be so modest, Olivia. It's your wedding day." Sophia stood behind me, her reflection in the three-way mirror smiling a smug, triumphant smile. I see it now. She didn't want me to look beautiful. She wanted me to look like someone I wasn't. She wanted me to be uncomfortable and self-conscious on my own wedding day, while she, in her perfectly chosen, elegant maid-of-honor dress, would shine. The morning of the wedding, the final act of their sick play began. I was at my parents' house, a flurry of stylists and photographers around me. Sophia was supposed to be there, helping me get ready, sharing in those last moments. But she suddenly feigned a frantic panic. "Oh my God, I completely forgot," she exclaimed, clutching her forehead. "I have to go to the venue to check on the floral arrangements. The florist is so unreliable, I just have a bad feeling." She kissed my cheek, a Judas kiss, and rushed out, promising to be back in an hour. An hour passed. Then 90 minutes. My makeup artist was packing up her kit. My father was pacing downstairs, checking his watch. I started calling Sophia's phone. No answer. Straight to voicemail. I called James. His phone also went straight to voicemail. That's when the first real wave of ice-cold panic hit me. It wasn't just a bride's fear of a logistical disaster anymore. It was a deeper, more primal dread. The wedding planner called me then, her voice tight with professional stress. "Olivia, we have a problem. James isn't here yet. None of his groomsmen have seen him since last night." That's when I knew. It wasn't a florist or traffic or a dead phone battery. It was something else. Something worse. I didn't say anything to my frantic parents. I just grabbed my car keys, my heart pounding a frantic, painful rhythm against my ribs. I'm going to the hotel to find him, I said, my voice a low whisper that was almost lost in the chaos. I'm sure he just overslept. But I didn't believe it for a second. I knew, with a gut-wrenching certainty that chilled me to the bone, that I wouldn't find him alone. And now, here I was, back in that hallway, the past and present colliding in one sickening, life-altering moment. The door to room 302 creaked open again. James stood there, his hair a mess, wearing only a pair of gray boxers. His face, which had been flushed with sleep, went as pale as a sheet when he saw me. Liv. Oh my God, Liv. What are you doing here? Sophia appeared behind him, clutching a white hotel sheet to her chest like a toga. Her eyes were wide with a fake, theatrical panic that she must have practiced in front of a mirror. Olivia! This isn't what it looks like. I didn't say a word. I just held up my phone, the call log to his father still open on the screen. Your parents are on their way, James. So are mine. And the entire wedding party. The color drained from both of their faces. They looked like they'd been electrocuted. You didn't, James whispered, taking a stumbling step towards me. Liv, please, don't do this. We can talk about this. It was a mistake, a stupid, one-time mistake. It meant nothing. A mistake? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet, devoid of all emotion. As he continued to plead, my eyes caught sight of Sophia's designer purse, lying open on the floor where she'd dropped it in her haste to cover herself. Spilling out of it, like a snake shedding its skin, were 3 plastic hotel keycards. All for the Millbrook Inn. All with different dates from the past 2 months written on them in black marker. I walked past them, into the room that smelled of their cheap perfume and stale betrayal, and picked up the keycards. I fanned them out like a winning poker hand, a hand that had just lost me everything and won me my life back. A one-time mistake? I held them up, the plastic rectangles glinting under the fluorescent lights. You've been making this mistake 4 months. While I was addressing wedding invitations until my fingers cramped. While I was at food tastings, making sure to include your favorite dessert. While I was sitting up at night, writing my vows, promising to love and trust you for the rest of my life. Sophia finally started to sob, real tears this time, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of self-pity, the tears of a child who'd been caught. I'm so sorry, Livy. I never meant to hurt you. I love him. You don't love him, I said, turning my cold, dead gaze on her. You just didn't want me to have him. There's a very big difference. James tried to grab my arm, his touch making my skin crawl. Olivia, let's just be rational. We don't have to blow up our lives over this. Think about the money, the guests, the embarrassment. The divorce would be a nightmare. I am thinking about the embarrassment, I said, pulling my arm away from his grasp as if he were on fire. Yours. Not mine. That's when the first knock came on the door. It was sharp and authoritative. It was James's father. I took a deep breath, walked to the door, opened it wide, and stepped aside. I was a silent, grim-faced usher to the matinee of their destruction. Mr. and Mrs. Harrison walked in, their faces beaming with wedding day excitement, which quickly curdled into confusion, and then abject horror, as they took in the scene, their son in his underwear, my sister clutching a sheet, and me, the jilted bride, standing there in my pre-wedding outfit, holding a fan of hotel keycards. My parents were next to arrive. My mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, her eyes wide. My father's face turned a dark, furious shade of red I'd never seen before. But my mother, true to form, recovered first. Her maternal instincts, so often absent for me, kicked in for her golden child. Her eyes went straight to Sophia. Oh, my poor baby, she whispered, rushing to my sister's side, past me as if I were invisible. What happened? Did he force you? Did he take advantage of you? That was the moment something inside me finally snapped. The lifetime of quiet acceptance, of swallowing my hurt, of making myself smaller to make them comfortable, it was over. He didn't force her, Mom, I said, my voice ringing out with an authority no one in that room had ever heard from me. It was the voice of a woman who had nothing left to lose. They have been doing this for months. Willingly. Eagerly. While you were telling me how lucky I was. While you were helping her pick out a dress to stand beside me at the altar and lie to my face. I threw the key cards onto the unmade bed. They landed with a soft, plastic clatter that sounded as loud as a gunshot in the silent, suffocating room. There's your proof. My mother looked from the cards to Sophia's tear-streaked face, her own expression a messy, unreadable conflict. But my father looked at me. And for the first time in my 26 years, I think he really saw me. He saw the pain I had been hiding, the strength I had been forced to build. He saw his daughter. James's father, a man I had always respected, a man whose entire business was built on his reputation for honor and integrity, turned to his son. His voice was low and shaking with a controlled, terrifying rage. You are a disgrace to this family. You have dishonored our name. James and Sophia just stood there, stammering, trying to spin a pathetic story of loneliness and a moment of weakness. But the evidence was lying on the bed, and the truth was in the air, thick and suffocating. I looked at the collection of broken, deceitful people in the room. This wasn't enough. A private humiliation wasn't justice. 200 people were waiting at a beautiful, expensive venue a few miles away, expecting a celebration of love. And I decided, in that moment, that they were going to get a celebration. Just not the one they were expecting. I turned to James and Sophia, who were now trying to make themselves as small as possible. Get dressed, I said. We're going to the wedding. They stared at me, their faces a mixture of bewilderment and terror. What? Sophia choked out, wiping her nose on the back of her hand. You heard me, I said, my voice leaving no room for argument. I looked directly at James, my eyes boring into his. You wanted to avoid a scene? You wanted to avoid public embarrassment? Fine. We'll do this my way. You will both come with me to the venue, you will stand where you are supposed to stand, and you will listen to what I have to say. Or I swear to you, I held up my phone, this photo I just took of this room, of the two of you, will be on every screen in that reception hall before you can even find your pants. I will email it to the board of directors at your father's company. I will text it to every single person we know. Choose. It was a bluff. I hadn't taken a photo. My hands had been shaking too much. But they didn't know that. Fear, raw and primal, flashed in their eyes. They knew I meant it. They were trapped. They had built this cage for me, piece by piece, over months of lies, and now I was locking them inside it with me. The drive to the venue was the longest, most silent 10 minutes of my life. I sat in the back of my father's car, my beautiful wedding dress a cloud of white silk and broken dreams around me. I didn't feel like a bride. I felt like a general going into battle, my heart a cold, hard drum. James and Sophia were in the car behind us, with his furious parents, prisoners of their own making. When we arrived, the scene was painfully perfect. The string quartet was playing, guests were mingling on the lawn, sipping champagne. Everything looked like a page out of a bridal magazine. A perfect, beautiful, expensive lie. The wedding planner, a woman named Chloe, rushed towards me, her face a mask of professional relief. Oh, thank God, you're here. We were so worried. Everything is fine, Chloe, I said, smiling a smile that didn't reach my eyes. A little last-minute drama, but we're ready to begin. I walked down the aisle on my father's arm. He squeezed my hand, a silent, powerful message of support I had longed for my entire life. All eyes were on me. I saw the faces of my friends, my family, my colleagues from the school where I taught kindergarten. They were all smiling, their faces full of love and happiness for me. They had no idea they were about to witness a funeral, not a wedding. James was waiting at the altar, his face pale and sweaty under the afternoon sun. He looked like a man walking to the gallows. Sophia stood in the maid of honor spot, her eyes red-rimmed and fixed on the floor. They looked like what they were, criminals at their own public execution. The officiant, a kind man from our local church, opened his book. "Dearly beloved," he began, his voice warm and inviting. I held up a hand, gently. "Excuse me, Pastor Mike," I said, my voice clear and steady, carrying across the silent, expectant crowd. "I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I have something I need to say first." A confused murmur went through the guests. The officiant looked taken aback, but he nodded graciously. I turned to face our 200 guests. I took the microphone from its stand. I took a deep, grounding breath. "Good afternoon, everyone," I began. "Thank you all for coming from near and far to celebrate with us today. I know you all came here expecting to witness a wedding, a union of two people in love. But I'm afraid there will be no wedding today." A collective gasp rippled through the hall. It was a physical sound, a wave of shock. I saw my mother's face, a mask of horror and disbelief. I saw James's father, his jaw tight, nod slowly. He knew what was coming. "You see," I continued, my eyes finding James and Sophia, forcing them to look at me. "I learned something very important this morning. I learned that the man I was about to marry, the man I trusted with my heart, my future, and my family, has been in a secret relationship for the past several months. A relationship with my maid of honor, my own sister." The silence in the room was absolute. It was so complete it felt like a physical pressure. It was so quiet you could hear the ice clinking in the glasses on the back tables. People's jaws were literally hanging open. I let the silence hang there for a long moment, letting the full weight of my words sink in, letting the horror of it land on every single person there. "I found them together in their hotel room this morning," I said, my voice never wavering. "So, while I was at home getting my hair and makeup done, dreaming of our future, they were celebrating our union early." I turned to them. Sophia was openly weeping now, ugly, heaving sobs of a spoiled child who had finally been denied something. James looked like he was going to be physically sick all over his expensive tuxedo. "But," I said, turning back to my shocked guests, my voice brightening with a theatrical flair I didn't know I possessed, "I don't want to ruin a perfectly good party. The bar is open, the band is here, and the food is paid for. So I would like to invite all of you to stay and celebrate with me. We are not celebrating a marriage today. We are celebrating the truth. We are celebrating my freedom. My freedom from lies, my freedom from betrayal, and my freedom from people who do not deserve one more second of my love or my time. Please, eat, drink, and enjoy this beautiful day. This is not my wedding party. This is my Independence Day party." And then, for the grand finale, the moment that would be talked about in Millbrook for years to come, I walked to the edge of the manicured lawn, where a small, picturesque lake shimmered in the afternoon sun. I pulled the heavy, 2-carat diamond engagement ring from my finger. The ring James had given me, the symbol of all his broken promises and my misplaced trust. I held it up high for everyone to see, letting it catch the sunlight one last time. And then, with all the strength I had, I threw it as far as I could into the water. It made a tiny, satisfying splash, and then it was gone forever. A smattering of applause started from the back, then grew into a roar. My friends from college were on their feet, cheering. My colleagues were whistling. I had turned the worst day of my life into my moment of ultimate power. I had taken back my narrative. As I walked back into the reception hall, a queen in a white dress, I saw James and Sophia trying to sneak out a side door, their faces burning with a shame so profound, so public, it was almost satisfying to watch. Almost. The aftermath was swift and brutal, just as I had intended. James's father, a man of his word and a titan in the local business community, confronted him right after the party, which had, against all odds, turned into a genuinely joyous celebration of my newfound freedom. In front of me and my parents, in the now empty reception hall, he delivered his verdict. James was to repay every single penny of the wedding costs himself, a sum well into the six figures. He was suspended indefinitely from the family construction company. And then came the final, most devastating blow. His father looked at him with cold, dead eyes and said, his voice flat, "You can forget about your inheritance. The lawyers will be hearing from me on Monday. You don't deserve to inherit a legacy of integrity you so clearly don't possess." It was a financial execution, swift and clean, a divorce from his own family fortune. Sophia's punishment was more social, but in a small town like Millbrook, that can be a fate worse than death. Reputation is currency here, and she was suddenly bankrupt. She had gone from being the golden girl, the one everyone adored, to a pariah overnight. Her so-called friends stopped calling. People would whisper and point when she walked into a store. I heard from a mutual acquaintance that she tried to go to her favorite brunch spot and the owner politely asked her to leave, saying her presence was disrupting the other customers. She tried to fight back, of course. In her desperation, she became vicious. She started a smear campaign, telling anyone who would listen that I was unstable, that I was jealous of her, that I had known about them all along and had agreed to some sort of twisted arrangement, only to change my mind at the last minute for dramatic effect. Her biggest mistake, however, was trying to interfere with my career. She called my principal, a wonderful woman named Mrs. Gable, and spun a wild, elaborate tale about my erratic behavior, suggesting I wasn't fit to be around children. That was when she crossed a line I would not tolerate. I had anticipated it. I had saved every single one of her increasingly desperate and abusive text messages. I had a log of her harassing phone calls. I took it all to a lawyer, a sharp woman who specialized in harassment cases. The look on Sophia's face when she was served with a restraining order at her new, menial job at a clothing store was something I will treasure for the rest of my days. It was the final, legal confirmation that she had no more power over me. She was legally bound to stay out of my life. My parents were the hardest, most complicated part of the healing process. For the first few weeks, my mother was still deep in denial, trapped in a lifetime of favoring her younger daughter. She'd call me, her voice pleading, begging me to forgive your sister and let this go for the sake of the family. Family is everything, Olivia, she'd plead, a mantra she'd repeated my whole life. No, Mom, I told her one day, my voice firm and clear, the voice of a woman who had finally found her footing. Self-respect is everything. And for years, you and Dad taught me very little about that. You taught me to be quiet, to be accommodating, to put Sophia's feelings before my own. That lesson is over. The change in them was slow, but it was real. It wasn't a single conversation that did it, but a slow dawning. The turning point happened about 6 months after the wedding that wasn't. My principal, Mrs. Gable, had been incredibly impressed with how I handled the entire crisis, with dignity, strength, and professionalism. She offered me a promotion. I was now the head of the kindergarten department, a leadership role that came with a significant and welcome salary increase. I decided to use some of that money to start a small scholarship at my school, a little fund for kids from low-income families who needed help with school supplies or field trip fees. I called it the Phoenix Fund. My school held a small evening event to announce the fund and celebrate its launch. I invited my parents, not expecting much. I gave a short speech, not about my personal story, but about the importance of kindness, of giving children a foundation of self-worth, of making every child feel seen and valued. As I spoke, I looked out into the audience of parents and teachers, and I saw my own parents. They weren't looking at me with the usual glazed-over politeness they reserved for my achievements. They were watching me. They were listening. And for the first time, I think they were seeing me not as their responsible daughter, but as a woman, a leader, a person of value in her own right, respected by her community. After the event, they came up to me, their faces etched with an emotion I couldn't quite place. My father, a man of few words, had tears in his eyes. "We were wrong, Olivia," he said, his voice thick and heavy with emotion. "All these years, we were wrong. We spent so much time looking at the shiny, sparkling things, we forgot to look at what was real and true. We forgot to look at you. I am so proud of the woman you are." My mother just hugged me, a real hug, one that felt like an apology and a promise all at once. It wasn't a magic fix for decades of hurt, but it was a beginning. A real one. It's been a little over a year now since the wedding that wasn't. The ripples have finally settled. James and Sophia are long gone. I heard through the grapevine that they moved out west together, but their relationship, built on a foundation of deceit and selfishness, predictably imploded under the weight of their own toxicity. He couldn't handle her when she wasn't a shiny, forbidden prize, and she couldn't stand him when he had no money or status. I don't waste my time thinking about them. My life is full. My work is rewarding. The Phoenix Fund is thriving, helping dozens of kids. I've reconnected with my parents on new, more honest terms. I've found a quiet, powerful joy in my own company. A few weeks ago, I was volunteering at the local hospital, something I started doing on Saturday mornings. I was reading stories to the kids in the pediatric ward. A man sat down beside me. He was one of the doctors, wearing blue scrubs, and he had kind eyes and a gentle smile. His name was Michael. We started talking about the book I was reading, a classic from my own childhood. The conversation was easy, comfortable, flowing without effort. He didn't know my story, he just saw me, a woman reading to children. He asked if he could buy me a coffee sometime, to thank me for volunteering and brightening up the ward. I smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached my eyes. And I said yes. I don't know what will happen with Michael. Maybe it will be just coffee. Maybe it will be more. But for the first time in my life, I'm not looking for someone to complete me, or a relationship to validate my existence. The funny thing is, the worst betrayal of my life didn't destroy me. It freed me. It forced me to burn down the life I thought I wanted, and from those ashes, I built a life that was truly, authentically my own. I learned that the best revenge isn't about hurting the people who hurt you. It's about building a life so happy, so full, and so unapologetically yours, that their betrayal becomes nothing more than a footnote in your own incredible story. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to share, but I feel it's important. Have you ever had to completely rebuild your life after a betrayal? Let me know in the comments below. And if my story resonated with you, please give this video a like and subscribe for more. It really does help.